this apostasy. You can't have apostasy run rampant in a church with no effect. That's what some people think. Well, let them think what they want, we'll think what we want, and that's fine. Now, there is some level of that in every church because of people being in different stages in their walk with the Lord. Some people have grown farther than others, and so they understand things better, hopefully better, than maybe a younger Christian or a less mature Christian, I think would be a better way of saying that. And so while there's going to be some of that, apostasy, on the other hand, is something that we don't want and we don't want to tolerate because it has an effect. And Jude gives us several examples of the effects of this apostasy in verses 5 through 10. In verse 5, he gives us the pilgrimage, talking about some false apostles. It says here in verse 5, I will therefore put you in remembrance, though you once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. They were false disciples. Well, wait a minute. They're part of the children of Israel. And of course, the book of Hebrews talks about this. The book of Romans talks about this. And other parts of the New Testament talks about it. But the fact of the matter is, they were false disciples, while ethnically they were Jews and thus part of the people of God. Spiritually, they weren't. Not know them, and that doesn't mean so that we can become, acquainted with them at all. And so there's some degradation, and Lot says, not so. He said, you guys know better than this. You know you're not supposed to do that. And what was their response? You're going to get it worse than they are. That was their response. There was some horrible degradation. What you see here is that there's a failure to fear. They knew it was right. They didn't care. They weren't bothered by the fact that God said it was wrong, the lifestyle that they were living. They didn't care. Didn't mean a thing to them. There was no fear. And that is part of how apostasy will affect the church, where a church as a whole can come to the point where they know what's right, but they don't care, and it doesn't bother them that they're doing differently than what God said. And what a shame that is. Then you have the Pentecostal age. Now, that's not talking about Pentecostals as in charismatics, but rather it's talking about Pentecostal as in to the time in which Jude is talking. In verses 8 through 10, it says, likewise also, so now back into present time when he's writing, likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not. But what they know naturally is brute beast, and those things they corrupt themselves. So you see, first of all, it talks about their behavior, that they're filthy dreamers. So the dreams that they have aren't even clean. We sometimes can have some really weird dreams. And, not bad, just really odd. I've had some dreams where my wife and I are, it's a number of years ago when our boys are younger, but we're living in a place where I lived when I was in elementary school. And we're involved with some of those people. I mean, it's just weird. Not anything wrong, not anything bad, just odd. And you wake up and you think, why? Why did I have to go through that? But they're filthy dreamers. They're very dreams. And many times, we're not even talking about dreams as in when you're asleep dreams. We're talking about dreams as in their aspirations are filthy. What their goals are, what they want, what they desire is ungodly. They're filthy dreamers, and it says they defile the flesh. Well, it goes right along. If that's your aspiration, if that's what you're headed for, that's where you're going to show up at. That's where you're going to arrive at. And so that's their behavior. They think about it. They dream about it. And then they do it. That's their behavior. And then their brazenness, that it shows us how that Michael, he wouldn't even get into an argument with the devil. The Lord rebuked these, what he said. But these people, it tells us in verse 10, they don't even know what they're talking about. But they'll talk about it anyway, as if they did. And then the things that they do know are just carnal, fleshly things. And in those things, again, they corrupt themselves. Now, you see what Jude is doing. These people who are apostatizers, they're carnal. It's all about the flesh. There's nothing spiritual involved in it. It's all about me, what I want, what makes me feel good, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. We certainly live in a world that's that way. But it's sad when people like this are part of one of the Lord's churches, because that has the effect of a cancer. And it spreads throughout. So we see that, and it's a terrible thing. But we go on in verses 11 through 13 and see how apostasy affects mentality. In other words, it affects how people think. If you don't believe right, you're not going to think right. If you don't believe right and you don't think right, then in the end, you're not going to act right. It's sort of like a snowball effect. And so we see how apostasy affects mentality here. And you see the men involved. He lays out three different individuals, Cain, Balaam, and Korah, here in verse number 11. It says, "Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah." So there's these three people. There's Cain, who attacked the salvation of God. God laid out the reality that without blood, there is no remission. And Cain said, you know what? I'm going to bring me some carrots from the garden. God's going to love them. He probably brought some Brussels sprouts too, which, they're worth burning. And anyway, I don't need to go there, but Cain, it was all about what can I do? And again, false religion, even a lot of it that calls itself Christian, revolves around what can I do? What must I do to be saved? And again, the scripture answers that question, but a lot of people, they don't accept that. Well, that's too easy. There's got to be more to it than that. I need to really, anyway, that's the way they think. But what Cain was doing, it was more than just, I didn't know better. He knew better. He knew what Adam and Eve told him had happened when they sinned, and how that God had a blood sacrifice, and he had used their Abel had brought a sacrifice that was pleasing to God, but not Cain. So it wasn't that Cain just didn't know any better. He was just doing the best he could with the understanding he had. It's that he was attacking God's salvation, saying, you know what? That's all fine and good for them, but I'm going to do it my way. And that's a dangerous road to go down. Then we have Balaam, and Balaam attacked the sovereignty of God. God said, don't go with the princes of Moab. And so he told them, the first time, he told them, well, I can't go with you. So Balak, the king of Moab, sent more princes, and he sent some that, higher rank. So, he sent the vice king, I don't know who he sent, but so he sent greater, higher ranking princes and offered him more things. And Balaam said, I'll have to ask God. I have to pray about it, which is a right answer. It's a good answer. And God said, well, if they call for you, then you can go with them. Now that's what it says. But then if you read the very next verse, it says that he was up and ready to go, saying, hey, let's get out of here. They didn't call on him. He went calling on them. And off he went. What was his problem? His problem was he thought he could do God's work any way he wanted. That, God was not sovereign, that God was not in control, that God had no authority to say this is right and this is wrong. And not only that, he thought that he could do whatever he wanted to and make money off of it. Which, again, it talks about here that they ran greedily after the heir of Balaam for reward. Which, that's what he did. But he's attacking the sovereignty of God. God said, Israel is my people. And Balaam said, well, let's see how we can get God to curse them. It's what he did. And so you have people involved in apostasy. That's their thinking. If I could just get this church to change what they're doing on this or that, it would be so much better for me. And then they try and, bring that about, just like Balaam. And then there's Korah. Korah was one of the sons of Levi. In the line of the tribe of Levi. So he had tasks and responsibility having to do with the tabernacle and the house of God. But that wasn't good enough for him. And so he attacked the servants of God. He said to Moses and Aaron, you take too much on you. In other words, what he's saying is, who do you think you are telling us what to do? That's what he's saying. So, we know God too. God speaks to us too. Do you think a pastor ever hears that? Oh yeah. I had somebody in my office tell me, hey, we're saved too. We have the Holy Spirit too. Now, look, yes, if they're saved, that's absolutely right. But in the particular thing they were talking about, they were absolutely wrong in what they were demanding. Just like Korah. Yes, he may have been part of the people of God, but he was absolutely wrong in what he was standing for. It was, so he had the idea, I can do what I want. You can't tell me what to do. And that sort of thing. So we see the mistake involved in verses 12 and 13. Says, these are spots in your feasts of charity when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds are they without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots, raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. So what he's saying is, these kind of people, the ones that are like Cain, the ones that are like Balaam, the ones that are like Korah, these people are in the church. They're there.